I wanted to talk about Final Fantasy XIV, having just finished it, but seeing as MMOs are giant, it would be impossible for me to put together any sort of comprehensive dissecting video anytime soon. It's a project that is extremely daunting and something that I will probably never do. But that doesn't mean I don't have things to say. I started my Final Fantasy XIV journey last summer when Shadowbringers was just released, and with the impressive review scores and the promise of the game being good now, there seemed to be no better time to start. Now, I can be a glutton for punishment when it comes to the media I consume, especially when it comes to JRPGs. As I get older, I'm finding less and less time to dedicate to these lengthy games, but my desire to collect everything and experience the entire story is in conflict. But despite this, I thought I'd give Final Fantasy XIV a shot, and a year later, I finally finished the main story. Sometimes I really don't want to think about the fact that I spent over $15 a month to watch a series of underwhelming cutscenes, but here we are. I've given myself the time to reflect on that process, which I find most frustrated with. In general, the stories of MMOs are often vehicles to get the player to the level cap, where the quote-unquote real game begins, which is usually raiding and large group activities. And when we think of the contents of these stories, they are generally concerned with large-scale wars among different factions and races. It justifies the spread of characters across the world. The classic in all sense of the definition is World of Warcraft, which undoubtedly has the most prolific story of any MMO to date. You're either Horde or Alliance, and each race has their own unique part of the map, with every detail reflecting some element of that culture. Important NPCs reflected the ideals and morality of the groups they represented. And while we can criticize Blizzard for relying on stereotypes and cliches, it made for a clear, simple experience for the player. You and everyone else playing is a small part of the bigger picture, and for the most part, you aren't directly interacting with the main characters of the story. But the mundane grind is rewarded with these gorgeous dramatic cutscenes that tie everything together and highlight those moments that can't be created through typical MMO gameplay. But more often than not, the cutscenes in Final Fantasy XIV don't capture that spectacle of the narrative. There are many quests where you do nothing but go from NPC to NPC, watch cutscenes of dialogue in typical shot reverse shot, a technique in filmmaking that is commonly used to capture the emotions of the character in conversation. But these scenes do very little to actually keep you engaged, oftentimes consisting of characters explaining what just happened to other characters. And I'm not talking a few scenes in between major battles, I'm talking whole quest chains of nothing but walking and talking. It even began giving me a yearning for collecting wolf pelts, anything for a chance to engage in combat. I even forgot what skills I was supposed to be using in battle because I just went so long without combat. There are exciting moments to be found in Final Fantasy XIV. There is a really memorable cutscene in which a minor character explodes into feathers. The boss fight scenes are definitely the highlight here. The spectacle of the boss appearing and transforming during its second stage is a classic Final Fantasy move. But what's missing here is the emotional connection between the characters and the development of the world. By the end of playing, I didn't really have a good sense of the geography of the land. I didn't understand the difference between the different cities. Just didn't get those classic Final Fantasy moments between the characters. We are still in this era of game narratives modeling themselves after blockbuster movies, but it always comes without the refinement and editing that makes them effective stories. Final Fantasy XIV takes hundreds of hours to complete. The cutscenes alone are around like 5 to 10 hours each expansion. It's exhausting, it's tiring, and there is no amount of convoluted lore or story that's gonna make that time enjoyable or effective. But the experience of Final Fantasy XIV is not just the story. It's about your player character's experience, who they interact with, the friends you meet in-game. I personally enjoyed the meta-narrative of my own character going through a Final Fantasy-themed journey than any sort of involvement they had in the main story. Overall, my experience with Final Fantasy XIV is mixed. My experiences with the narrative are only a small portion of that. I'd like to hear what your guys' experience was like playing through Final Fantasy XIV. Did you start from the beginning, or are you trying to catch up to Shadowbringers for the next expansion? Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of these rant-style videos like this in the future too.